Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we're going to get into a potential big move the Eagles could still make. Yes, in July with training camp just a week away. Plus, who's the Eagles' Jenga piece outside of Jalen Hurts? You take that player away and things get bad. We're going to get into that on today's edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to our 5th episode of the week. All of them downloaded into your phone wherever you get the podcast, free and available Monday through Friday, and on YouTube as well. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter, always talking birds all throughout the day, at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE, and at GC24_football. Got a loaded show for you today. And Gino, as I said in the open, we're going to lead with a move the Eagles could still make that's massive. We always say, even after the draft, if they don't get a safety or a linebacker or a receiver or a running back like in 2017, a safety this past year, or a CB2, that Howie Roseman loves to do things in the summer, right? We saw it in 2017 with LeGarrette Blount and Ronald Darby. We saw it last year with Steven Nelson. We've seen it this year with James Bradberry and Jaquiski Tartt. And it felt like safety was the last move to be made, right? And they brought in Tartt. You're like, okay, this roster looks set. Let's see what happens in training camp. But, Gino, there is at safety, and I know they're more set now with Tartt, Harris, and Epps than they were coming out of the draft since no safety really fell. But we saw the report yesterday that the Cincinnati Bengals are lowballing star safety Jessie Bates significantly, only offering him $4 million more than what he's currently at with the franchise tag in place. They weren't even close to a long-term extension before yesterday's deadline for players on the tag to sign a long-term deal with their team. And the Eagles are an obvious choice because Howie Roseman's aggressive. He's got the draft picks in the future. He's got the need at safety. This is a versatile player like Malcolm Jenkins they've been missing. It makes so much sense, man. And I know you as a safety guy got to be excited about. I think the chances are still pretty low, but there's a chance, man. And he is a star.
Let's start first with Cincinnati. What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Typical Bengals, though, right? I mean, I can't say it's too surprising.
He made one of the biggest plays in the Super Bowl. And we're arguing about paying him not just $4 million more. He wanted $4 million per year more than what they were offering him. That's a low ball offer. Now, to the Philadelphia Eagles, got to start with my first point. Do I expect them to get a top safety? No, because they have proved me wrong every single time.
Because they crush your dreams every single time.
Every single time. So my hopes and dreams are way down.
Expect disappointment and hope for the best, you know. I like the mindset you have.
That's why 2017 was great. We were all expecting disappointment. You go out and win a Super Bowl. But turning back to Jessie Bates, identifying the player that you are missing in terms of a very good to elite player.
He's the missing piece.
At that position, corner has one in Darius Slay. The defensive line has a bunch. Linebacker, you could make the argument that this is the most talented group that they've had.
Easily.
Safety is still the one area where you have solid to good players that will fill in different areas at different times. Jessie Bates is a true 360, do it all on the field safety. He could cover high. He could cover deep. He could run across the entire length of the field. His range is absolutely bananas. Coming downhill and tackling in the alley is something he loves to do. He wants to put his hat downhill, and he's going to make a lick on you. And they need a player like this. They haven't had it since Malcolm Jenkins, Rodney McLeod. Now they're both gone. You don't have Brian Dawkins anymore. You haven't replaced that player that you lost in Dawkins. You had Malcolm Jenkins, who was close, but in Philadelphia, to see how instrumental safeties have been, and not just the top guys. You look at, Quentin Michaels of the world, Lou. Those players we would take right now with a blink of an eye.
Well, look when you didn't have them, Gino. Look when you had Patrick Chung and you had Nate Allen and Kirk Coleman, and even last year. Yes. Yeah, it depends on what you do with your defense. And, I think when you have to talk about paying a guy a long-term deal and trading a top asset away, like you did with A.J. Brown at receiver, you got to be willing to, if you're going to make that much of an investment in a player, there's got to be a big role for them, right? So you don't do that for Jamal Adams. as you saw with the Seahawks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the stigma with safeties. Like, look at Jamal Adams, don't invest all that. But Jamal Adams isn't a guy that can do everything. Jessie Bates is a player that, as you said, can play deep. The range this guy has going sideline to sideline, the man-to-man coverage skills he has against tight ends, and the ball skills, the tackling. That is somebody, as you said, with Malcolm Jenkins, we saw the value in. That's somebody I'd be willing to deal a top pick for and a long-term deal. He really is the missing piece. And, it depends on, again, the role he'd have. And again, we saw a lot of the 2 deep he did last year, but the Eagles clearly had a bigger role for a safety this offseason, because why else would you try to sign the top free agent in the market in Marcus Williams in March? You weren't trying to pay Marcus Williams top dollar on the open market if you plan on just having him cover, one side of the football field. So I think there is a bigger role that they want for a safety, and Jessie Bates would fit that. I'm not willing to give up one of the first-round picks next year because you want that insurance until you see what Jalen Hurts is. But if you got to give up a 2+ in a contract, I'm in. They've already been willing to do it with A.J. Brown, and you have the draft flexibility. So I know you're in, man. Jessie Bates would be literally the missing piece of this team in 2022 to be like, this roster is set.
Set not just for 2022, but beyond. Because if you look at the landscape
he's young.
of the safety position, after this year, you won't have to pay Jaquiski Tart. You could get him off the books. You could also get Anthony Harris off the books.
Marcus Epps
Marcus Epps is making next to nothing because he was a guy who was claimed off of waivers as an undrafted free agent. Then you have Kevon Wallace, who's still on his rookie contract. So you could get out from that. You still have big names like Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave, who already have potential replacements that could come off the book.
On rookie deals. Yep.
On rookie deals, exactly. So with that money, who do you pay? You pay the quarterback of your defense. You're probably not going to pay a linebacker because if you do pay Kaiser White, he's not going to command top dollar, in my opinion. He'll
even
get
top dollar for an off-ball linebacker, really, what is that?
Right. 6 to 8, maybe 9 if he has a very good season. But safety, we were talking about paying Marcus Williams $14 to $15 a year. I'll pay that to Jessie Bates any day of the week simply because he can do it all. Even if you do play too high, look at the Buffalo Bills. 2 of their highest paid defensive players are Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer.
And if you play too high, guess what? You can still have a third safety. The Eagles had a ton of 3 safety sets in the Jim Schwartz era. Last year, you couldn't do it because you didn't have the personnel. But this year, you want a dime package where you can get a big nickel, where you can have 3 safeties out there. And Bates doesn't always have to be the guy playing deep. He's really good playing deep, but he can be the guy down in the box too and in man coverage. So even if that was the case, that's still, I think that's a positive. I mean, he can, again, like you said, he's versatile and can do everything.
He would play nearly 100% of the snaps because when you go to a too high formation, you're still going to disguise a lot of things. You'll see cover 3 where they drop a guy down. One of the safeties will come down. If they bring pressure off the edge, the safety will come down and replace that position. Then what's his responsibility in the pass game? He's got to be responsible for the tight end. He's got to make sure that number 2 receiver doesn't get vertical on him. Jessie Bates has done that at the highest of levels, Lou. Look at what he was doing in the Super Bowl last year. He was instrumental in getting that team to where it was. His leadership, his smarts, and his overall playmaking ability. You look at a safety and what you want. You want a young player. You want somebody that has range. You want somebody that has versatility. He has all of those things. Identify a player coming off of their first contract that is potentially getting lowballed elsewhere. How many times have we talked about that, Lou? In Howie Roseman's ability to
he
go
likes
and
to
find
take advantage
players.
of those situations, and he's a player worth investing the contract. Like he's the A.J. Brown of your defense. He's worth the picks and the money because of how young he is, and he plays at an elite level. And I know the Jalen Hurts contract is looming in the background, but we don't know if Jalen Hurts is even the guy. Hypothetically, there's a scenario next year where you have another quarterback on a 4 or 5 year rookie deal.
Jalen's not getting 40 plus.
No, right. And even if he wasn't the quarterback, that helps your books even more to pay a guy like Jessie Bates. So you have the flexibility, the aggression. One of our listeners, though, did make a good point on Twitter responding to me saying that it might be a moot point because the Bengals, the way they traditionally operate, they don't like to trade players in this situation and with the way they're contending. But Bates might not even report to training camp, and who knows? He might try to force their hand, and we'll see how it all plays out. But it's going to be something interesting to follow, and it makes a lot of sense for the Eagles. It's just funny, Gino, like we're a week away from training camp, and there's still like a blockbuster move this team could make. which definitely keeps it interesting. He would be one of the missing pieces. Gino, speaking of missing pieces, coming up next, the Jenga piece of the Eagles offense and defense, like removing Jalen Hurts, right? Jessie Bates, you add him. That's the piece they don't have. But what about the piece they already had that if you took away, it would hurt them more than at other positions? So we're going to get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
But before we do that, we have a message from our friends over at Built Bar. Lou, I get home from coaching football yesterday, show up at my door. What's sitting there? A beautiful box of Built Bar. I open it up.
And it's a top-tier flavor, man.
Top tier. Coconut brownie chunk puff. Say that 15 times fast, folks. For the people that love the summertime, you love that nice, refreshing flavor of coconut. I used to hate coconut, and then I tried Built Bar. It doesn't taste like that fake coconut flavor. It tastes like it just came off of the tree. They put it in there. They cover it with chocolate. And guess what? You get some marshmallow flavors too. You get that taste this summer. Not only are they delicious, but they're nutritious as well. You're not even going to consume 200 calories. You're going to get limited carbohydrates, limited sugar, getting a boatload of protein. Take it before you go and coach a long day of football in 100-degree heat. I do it every single morning at 6 a.m. Go do it before your workout. Bring them to the tailgate. Bring them afterwards when you're going home from the Eagles game. You can eat them literally whenever, wherever, and you're not going to feel any of the guilt that you get in consuming a big, hefty milkshake this time of year. No, you can enjoy that sweet taste of coconut chocolate. 100% real chocolate, by the way. It doesn't taste like chalk. It is delicious. So today, go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. You can use that on any of their varieties. You could get a variety pack. You could get the traditional flavors, or you could try the coconut brownie chunk puff. Come on, that just tastes way too good. So go to Built.com to get that offer today.
All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into episode 5 this week of 5. Download it into your phone wherever you get the show, and we thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen and watch each and every day because we're available every day on YouTube. Guys, also make sure on YouTube and on your podcast platforms you subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast. First off, it's all the news across the league in under 30 minutes, but also we've got a special series starting up this Monday, July 18th. Which NFL stars move the betting line the most in the 2022 regular season? Well, starting on Monday the 18th, Locked On's going to give you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers at BetOnline. I reacted live on that show to where Jalen Hurts is going to end up, and I was okay with it. So that's a little hint. It's available July 18th on the Locked On NFL podcast, wherever you get your shows, and on YouTube. Gino, on today's edition of LOE, we got into, potentially the missing piece the Eagles still don't have on this roster, right? It could be Jessie Bates. If the Bengals were willing to listen to offers now that the deadline's passed where they can't get a long-term deal done, they were lowballing him. Maybe he doesn't report to training camp in a week. The Eagles not desperately, but they could use a player of his caliber on defense. It's really the one guy that they don't have. Gino, when it comes to now the guys they do have on offense and defense, obviously we know quarterback is more valuable than any position, right? You take Jalen Hurts away, I think it would affect this team more than pretty much any starter. Removing quarterback, who for you, and my guy, Dave Damashek, one of my favorite podcasters growing up, formerly of NFL Network, he kind of created the label of this, the Jenga piece. You remove the piece and the tower falls. The Eagles are pretty deep, and they've done a good job of not having a lot of Jenga pieces on their roster. But if you had to say, you take one guy away from this Eagles team, they're going to be vastly different this year and would struggle more than if you took away somebody else.
And this is open to either side of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Offense, defense, yeah, for sure.
I think offense, you have the ability to kind of maneuver if any of those guys went down. It would be tough, of course. Let's say Jordan Mailata goes down. Well, the good thing is they've invested heavily at the tackle position. You have LaRaven Clark, who hasn't played in a few years. His tires are fresh, and he was one of the better swing tackles in football. You could get by a couple games with him. And you also have
Andre Dillard.
Yeah, Andre Dillard as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. They could trade Dillard still, and I wouldn't bad not at that. But you have options. Let's go to defense. Safety, we know that there's not a top guy, right? The other defensive back position, it's evidently clear.
Yes.
If he goes down, and we got to start this, Lou, we can only refer to him as Slay. They put that video out where he corrected everybody when they called him Darius. So we got to refer to him as Slay.
That'd be funny. He goes on the mic. Slay. Yeah,
Slay.
it's Slay.
Slay. If Slay goes down, this defense has the possibility to falter and go back to the ways that we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years. Because James Bradbury's a good number 2, right? He did okay as a number 1 last year, but that's not who he is anymore. Then you would have to move him over to the number 1. And then who is your number 2 guy after that? Second-year Zach McPherson, who saw limited snaps. One of the young guys in Tay Guan that you could bring in, Kari Vincent Jr. Slay is the Jenga tower itself.
Yeah.
If he is down, it makes everybody worse. It makes the defensive line worse. It makes the secondary worse. The linebackers are going to have a tougher job. If he goes down, I will be legitimately scared for the direction of this.
I agree.
Next year.
Yeah. I said the same thing on defense. Darius Slay, because again, you take away a safety, I don't know, it's kind of a wash, honestly, at this point. And
right.
Yeah, you have James Bradbury and you have Avonte Maddox, but suddenly Bradbury has to cover wide receiver 1, and suddenly Avonte Maddox's responsibilities definitely hike up. Maybe you move him on the outside and you put him back on a spot that he wasn't comfortable in because, like you said,
not do that.
You don't trust all the young corners on this roster. And we've seen the Michael Jacquets of the world, what can happen when an inexperienced corner goes out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's hard. It's a tough ask. Corner is one of the toughest positions in the NFL to play. Maybe outside of quarterback, it might be the hardest, honestly, to succeed consistently in this league. I know on the defensive side of the football, and you're right, it's where they're thinnest. I think Darius Slay is definitely the Jenga piece on defense. On offense, again, they've done a great job on both sides of the ball, where if they lose Josh Sweat, they've got Hassan Riddick, they've got Brandon Graham, they've got Derek Barnett. They have on the defensive line and inside Milton Williams and Jordan Davis with Cox and Hargrave. They're deep. Linebacker even, man. Davian Taylor right now is like their 4th linebacker. Mm-hmm. Sean Bradley, even we both like. Yeah. And think he's better than the snaps he gets. I think on offense, the same thing. The only thin spot they really do have, though, is tight end. Dallas Goedert, he's had injury history, pretty deep injury history. If he went down for a long, extended period of time, I know the Eagles run way more 11 now than they used to. Before, though, it was more based on necessity than preference. But regardless, they ran a ton of 12 personnel. So they run a lot of 3 receiver sets. And, that makes the tight end position a little less valuable than it did. But Dallas Goedert, the deep ability he has, right? 14.4 yards per reception last year. The blocking ability he has, the presence he has over the middle is going to be huge for Jalen Hurts' development. He was Hurts' go-to guy in the red zone. You take him away, that offense loses a significant reliable weapon on third down, the red zone, everywhere. And just like corner, who's the next man up? It's Tyree Jackson is a quarterback that's converting to tight end, right? And he's coming off a torn ACL, bunch of injuries last year, inexperienced. Jack Stahl was a good run blocker last year, but didn't show anything as a receiver. You have Grant Calcaterra, the 7th round rookie, reliable hands, but who knows for a day 3 pick, and then JJ Arcega-Whiteside, a receiver switching to tight end this year. So you got 2 guys switching positions. You got one guy that we don't know if he can really catch that well, and another one's a 7th round rookie. Goddard and Slay, are probably the 2 Jenga pieces outside of Hurts.
Yeah, you'd have to believe that if Goddard goes down, it makes things a lot more difficult. It'll be a much more committee-based, which will allow defenses to identify what they're going to run. So if Grant Calcaterra is out there versus Jack Stoll, I think it's a pretty good indicator of which way the direction is going to go. Stoll's going to be in on a rundown. You're going to see Calcaterra in there on receiving downs. But thank goodness number 19 has changed to tight end. I'm just kidding. I believe that Calcaterra is a much better number 2 than you had last year in terms of receiving. So that won't be as big of a hindrance as it was if it was just Jack Stoll who had to step up. They still don't have the 1-2 of Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, which we've been accustomed to. So I think we have to maybe put down what we expect from that position outside of the top guy. We kind of have to put our expectations down a little bit. But you're right. If Dallas Goedert does go down, that's one of those ones where it's not where if Slay goes down, the whole tower just falls out. It might be one where like the top 4 or 5 rows fall off and you still lose anyway. You don't want to be in that position. It's a precarious place to be. And we haven't seen them not have one of the top 5 tight ends in football lining up in the rotation over the past 10 years since 2013. And Zach Ertz, man.
Well, that's the thing is, when Ertz got hurt over the last few years or Goddard, you still had the other guy. You don't have the other guy in this roster right now. So I don't think it would kill them if they lost Goddard because of the receivers they have. And again, you still have the offensive line and the running backs, and you could definitely make up for it as they've made up for receiver in the past. It would kind of be the reverse of like what happened in 2019 and, even 2020 as well. And even with Darius Slay, like you still have James Bradbury and Avonte Maddox. 2/3 of the corners are great, but both positions here, you're throwing in a young, inexperienced player that it's not even just a young, inexperienced player, but these aren't first, second round talents. These are late picks. These are undrafted rookies. These are
it's not Trey
guys.
McBride that you have behind him.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, he's never played and he's young, but he's a second round talent. Like the Eagles, they don't have that either at either of these positions. And they also don't have Jessie Bates right now. So, the Bills you mentioned earlier with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, when Tre'Davious White went down, the safeties really helped out in that way too, making up for that loss. The Eagles, they don't have that guy behind them like they did with Malcolm Jenkins in 2018. When Chandon Sullivan's in there and, Devontae Bowsby, Jenkins can rally the troops and find a way to overcompensate for that. So, yeah, I think those two, some great points from you with corner and at tight end. I think Slay and Goddard are definitely the Jenga pieces. I want to get into with you as we wrap up the show coming up next, the deepest spots on this Eagles roster. Because again, Howie's done a great job of kind of covering this team. And that's great for the 2022 season. Depth is key in the NFL. But first, a shout out to one of our sponsors of the day. It's the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including right now the MLB. Phillies got a big win yesterday, 2-1. Their pitching actually looks pretty good recently. Make sure you bet on the Phillies to cover, hit the over, whatever you want to do with baseball betting right now. You've also got the NFL, some futures, MVP, Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, NBA. Still don't know where Kevin Durant's going to go and Kyrie Irving. Bet on it all. MMA, boxing, and golf as well right now at betonline.net. Head over to the website or use your mobile device, betonline.net today to learn more about the trends in action because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up episode 5 this week of 5. Download it into your phone wherever you get Locked On Eagles. Also free and available in video form on YouTube. Getting into Jessie Bates. Could the Eagles potentially still make a blockbuster trade this summer? We saw it a few years ago with Ronald Darby late in August. Howie Roseman is always trying to make moves to improve this roster, and safety could be that missing piece. And Gino, we also talked about if you miss a piece right now, you have who makes the biggest impact. We both agreed it's Dallas Goedert at tight end on offense, and it's Darius Slay at corner. But again, shout out to Slay. It's just Slay. But Howie Roseman, really outside of those two, even those two, we even said at the end of the segment, you can still get by. You can't miss both all season, but you can get through a couple weeks. Howie Roseman's done a great job of saying, you lose Kazir White, I've got Nakobe Dean. You lose Nakobe Dean, I've got the 2 starters from last year, TJ Edwards and Davian Taylor. You lose a defensive tackle, you've got 3 legitimate other options. The same on the edge. The offensive line is super deep. Running back, receiver. This team is extremely deep, and I think they learned their lesson. Not that they weren't trying to get depth early in the, after the 2017 run. You had 2018, 2019, 2020, but I think there was an added emphasis on just continuing to add talent at all costs this year because of the historic rate of injuries the Eagles had, right? I mean, I think this year you're going to be okay. You don't want those injuries ever to your starters, but they're set up way better to handle those than they were.
I agree. And at multiple positions too. You look at corner, and that might be, let's say, the least of the deep positions. You still have young guys that can go in there and develop that are pretty talented. I mean, UDFA, Josh Jobe, Mario Goodrich, those are 2 guys that were highly coveted in the UDFA pool. Now, are they going to be your number 3, 4 corner? No, but to have 6, 7 guys that could have special teams impact, which that is going to be their position in year 1, potentially year 2, you have to look there. But if you look at offense and defense, both lines are so ridiculously deep.
I agree. I think those are the 2 deepest positions.
I just want to read off all of the players that will be seeing snaps on the defensive line this year, Lou. Brandon Graham, Fletcher
Yep.
Cox, Javon Hargrave, Derek Barnett, Josh Sweat, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Teron Jackson. You also have Marlon Tuipulotu, who you drafted last year, Marvin Wilson, who saw action last year, Wren, who they saw action late in the season last year. You also have your outside linebackers being Hassan Reddick, Patrick Johnson. The list goes on and on. That is 17 players right there, just about. And you have to cut this roster down. This is going to be one of the most highly coveted positions for other teams come that 53-man cutdown day, because the Eagles just have way too much depth there. It is incredibly deep. And unfortunately, you don't get to have college-sized rosters with 80, 90 guys going into each week. It's the unfortunate game of only keeping 53, and they usually keep about 10. That's a tough decision on who they're going to keep there.
Yeah, and I think by far, they have a lot of, they're deeper at some spots than they weren't in the past, as we mentioned, like linebacker. Year two starters last year that helped turn around the defense at the second half of the season because of how bad Eric Wilson was and Alex Singleton, Davian Taylor, and TJ Edwards. They're fighting each other just for, I don't know, the third most snaps for an off-ball linebacker, and it might even be fourth with the way they're going to utilize Hassan Reddick in that Sam spot, right? The strong side.
We got Kyron Johnson too. We got
Kyron Johnson. Who knows? Patrick Johnson too. What they're going to what they're going to do with him this year in year two. So they're extremely deep at a lot of spots. But we know the Eagles. The trenches is where they're always going to be the deepest. And they couldn't form a starting lineup with their backups, but it's close. And I think they might come close to some starting units up front. When you just look at their defensive line. Their backups, like their starting lineup of backups would be Derek Barnett, Milton Williams, let's just say Jordan Davis, and Brandon Graham. So your two edge rushers from the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's a starting unit. Absolutely. And
the third might be in contention to start as well.
And then on the offensive line, right, you have Andre Dillard's a first-round pick at left tackle. Your left guard could be, I don't know, Sua Apeta or Jack Driscoll or Isaac Seumalo. Seumalo we saw was a high-end left guard for a while. Your center is a second-round pick in Cam Jurgens. Your right guard could be, again, one of the other interior guards. And then, I don't know, Raven Clark at right tackle. Like they are so deep up front. Maybe that even is a low end. It would be one of the worst starting offensive lines in football, but there could be a lot. Most teams have a way worse starting lineup of backups on the lines.
Would have been much better than the Giants line that they put out the last couple of seasons as well, right, Lou?
And looking at teams like Seattle, it's probably pretty close, if not better. Yeah.
And you have to look at wide receiver too. Like your second three, for once, is a pretty formidable trio of players because you're going to start AJ, you're going to start Devontae, you're going to start Quez, right? Beyond that, you have Zach Pascal, who played in a starter type of role for Indianapolis over the past couple of years. Jalen Reagor, who, if you believe that he has anything left, which I'm sure a team late in camp might take a flyer on him, and Greg Ward, who has been a player who has gotten you into the playoffs over a couple seasons. And then beyond that, a young Deion Kane, John Hightower, Britton Covey, who could be your return specialist, Devin Allen, who's one of the fastest people on the planet, Carrick Wheatfall, Josh Hammond, who they got from Jacksonville. They're going to have a pretty solid competition for that fifth and sixth wide receiver spot. It's going to come down to ultimately who is going to be the best special teams player, which I believe would be Britton Covey. I put that out today. I announced that we'll be coming back with our
third Jacory
Shepard Award recipient. Somebody already said the favorite should be Britton Covey. I believe so as well. But running back too, Lou, you're 5 deep at this position with Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. I'd say that's top 3.
And you can always bring back Jordan Howard.
A literal top three.
Right.
Yeah, and you have Jason Huntley, who's probably going to be in contention to be a return specialist for how well he runs. And then Kennedy Brooks, coming out of Oklahoma, is one of the top undrafted free agents. He's a power style runner who's unlike any of these guys on the roster. So he's going to have chances to make waves in camp. This offense, Lou, every single position, even quarterback with Gardner and Carson Strong now too.
It's deep, man.
deep, man. It's going to be tough. It's going to stink for one that they only have 15 practice squad spots that they're going to lose some talent. But at the same time, it's going to be one of the deepest practice squads that you have in the NFL.
It's one of the deepest rosters in the NFL. It's why the Eagles are getting so much hype. It's not just the starters on paper, but it's the depth of this football team, and we'll see it all come together starting next week. July 26th, training camp kicks off that Tuesday at the NovaCare Complex. We've got you covered all throughout the day, all throughout the week, Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms. Locked On Eagles is your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, also available in video form as well on YouTube. And make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. That's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast. All the news across the league in under 30 minutes. For my co-host Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.